Number 1, consider authorizing the execution of an agreement with Roslyn Preservation LLC for preparation of a National Register nomination for a Gardner Downtown Historic District.
Good evening. To get started, I'm going to have Amanda Laughlin from Rosen Preservation. She's going to go through what a historic district is and provide information for, and then answer any questions. So.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, everyone.
Yeah, welcome, Amanda.
I'm a little short, so sorry about that.
You can pull that down.
Got that. I can't see you over the. Yes, I'm Amanda Laughlin. I'm with Rosen Preservation, and we are happy to answer any questions about this. I'm giving this presentation. I gave it to Jim and their committee a couple weeks ago, so I just wanted to provide some information for you all. We're looking at, we were asked to look at a potential historic district for downtown Gardner. It would incorporate about 29 properties, 27 of which we would consider contributing. It would be concentrated just right over there at Main and Elm Street, so we're right next door to it. There are two different things I wanted to talk about. One is what is a historic district, and then also some of the benefits that come with being in a historic district. We're looking at a National Register of Historic Places district. There are only 5 buildings in Gardner that are actually listed in the National Register. So I used to work for the state of Kansas, and so I know that really well, that we always try to get things listed in Gardner. This is an honorary designation, meaning that you're just really upholding and just kind of looking at, hey, we've got something here that's worth saving. It's, you know, it helps you provide history for future generations about the history of the city. It does allow for properties to be eligible for federal historic tax credits, which allow for maintaining the building. There's no restrictions to being in the National Register. There's no property rights transfers, or you don't have to make your building available to the public. It's strictly honorary. And then there is a federal law review, so if there's any state highways, which I see you've got a lot of work going on out here, so there's a little federal law that allows for the review to say, is any of these projects going to affect the historic buildings? So it does add a little layer of protection to some of the properties. Kansas is one of the few states that also has a Register of Historic Kansas Places, and everything that's listed in the National Register is also listed in the Register of Historic Kansas Places. There's actually 6 buildings listed in Gardner, so that means there's 1 building that's just in the state register. Again, it is an honorary designation, and being in the state register allows for properties to be eligible for state historic tax credits. So it's 2 different tax credit programs, plus there's a Kansas Heritage Trust Fund grant, which is a bricks and mortar type of grant. And then there is a state law review that's on all permitted projects that are in historic districts. So again, that's a kind of an oversight that allows for the protection of the district. So being in the National Register, I mentioned the historic tax credits. It's a 20% credit towards your income producing property. So it's your income tax, it's a tax credit. It is an incentive, not a grant, so you're not just throwing money, you have to actually earn. Basically, you have to play by the rules, and then you get the 20% credit. It is, again, on just income producing properties only. The projects are reviewed at the State Historic Preservation Office and at the federal level, so there's a lot of oversight on that, but you can also couple it with the state tax credit. So you're getting a 20% credit on federal, and then in Kansas, we just upped the state tax credit structure. It's a tiered credit that's based on population sizes, so I just looked a little bit, and you guys are about 24,000 in Gardner, so you're at a 30% state income tax credit that properties would be eligible for. And this would be for any listed property, so not just income producing, so churches, schools, and it goes to help with the maintenance costs of the buildings. And again, the credits are issued after completion of the project. Again, incentive, not a grant, and it is reviewed at the state. Basic criteria of what properties can be they can receive the historic tax credits. Again, it's federal projects to be income producing. So I think every single building we looked at Main and Elm would be an income producing property. It needs to be listed in the state or national registers. It needs to have a certified rehabilitation, which is basically what I was talking about with the state and the feds. Look at the project and make sure that whatever is going on, it's kind of the do no harm approach to buildings, making sure that it's following a certain set of standards. There needs to be a substantial investment in the property, so $5,000 or the equivalent of the adjusted basis. And then there are qualified rehabilitation expenditures, which is a huge list of things, anything from re-roofing to mechanical systems if you need to upgrade an elevator. This picture is not in Kansas, sorry, I don't know where that is. And then when I mentioned the certified historic structure, that basically just means it's listed either individually or in this case, in our case, it would be a contributing to a district. But we're looking at the National Register Historic District first because that is the first step in that process. That's what certifies the properties in order to allow them to be eligible for those tax credits. And those are voluntary programs. You don't have to take advantage of the tax credits if you don't want to. So quick and dirty, and I'm here to answer questions.
Jim, did you want to?
Yeah, we'll do that. Do questions in a minute. So the establishment of a downtown historic district is consistent with the city's vision for the revitalization of the downtown area to include preservation of the buildings that best represent the district. We discussed this proposal at a meeting of the city's Economic Development Council, and there was unanimous consent to recommend approval of the agreement using transient guest tax funds. We also sent letters out to all the property owners, and then the Chamber of Commerce assisted us sending emails to not only property owners, but contacts for business owners. And that was to set up a public meeting via Zoom to discuss the district and answer questions. Steve Hines from Groundhouse was the only one in attendance, and he indicated strong support for the proposal. I think we had at least one other person that was not able to get on that we exchanged information with. So I recommend approval to allow city administrator to execute an agreement with Rosen Preservation LLC for services in the amount of $30,000 from the transient guest tax fund.
Thank you, Jim. Public comment on new business item number 1. Okay. Council, questions?
This won't hurt the chances if somebody buys a space and wants to remodel it into a restaurant or something like that. Is it exterior only, interior, or they just have to go through an extra level if they want to revamp the space?
Yeah, there's 2 levels to that. People can do whatever they want. It doesn't restrict the property whatsoever. If they're taking advantage of the tax credits, you can do whatever you need to transfer that around. They're just little hoops to jump through if you want to, do certain things with the building. But yeah,
Those certain things would be like structural to the building. So like, adding a patio, for example, or something like that. Is that correct?
yeah, it's a whole range of items. It's not just the exterior; it's the interior as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, patios, rooftops. I don't know that you put a rooftop addition on anything down here, but we see a lot of like rehabs of buildings where you have residential up front and then or up top and then commercial below. So it just helps with those expenditures.
I saw something on Facebook comment. They're questioning the ADA, and if this becomes a historic district, are there ADA requirements that maybe were grandfathered in previously that would now have to be upheld or in any way?
That's a good question too. Sorry if I just overstepped you.
No, go ahead.
I didn't know if you were going to say something.
You're the expert.
With changing buildings, it's a lot of times it is grandfathered in, and it's whatever the local code is. So if you guys are cool with keeping certain ADA functionalities, like you can do that. But they can also, if they're wanting to use tax credits to redo things, they can use that to make ADA entrances or put in elevators if they need to. So there's no requirement that you have to do it. It just needs to, obviously follow local codes.
I think there's a lot of folks in that district that would love to be able to make their buildings more accessible that just can't afford to do it because the expense is significant, close to prohibitive.
Yeah.
So this actually helps to aid in getting some of these buildings up to ADA standards.
So I think some people have a misconception of the historic district means that we guarantee that we protect the history of the buildings, right? Because if I come in with a boatload of money whatever I want to that building. I can change the entire facade, inside and outside, never apply for a credit, and it will never look like a historic building ever again, correct?
No. There is a state, Kansas has a state law review for all of the buildings. So there are anything that's permitted. So whatever you, as a city of Gardner permit, you have a building permit, that would be reviewed at the state. So there's that little level of oversight to make sure that whatever permitted projects are happening to a building, it retains the historic integrity of that building. So it's, the state's really good at working with people too if they need to do something that may, be contrary. Or if they need to upgrade something, they're really good with working with people. But there is a certain level, that's what that state law review is for. And ultimately, you guys can override it. If someone's like, I don't like what the state said, they come back here to you guys as city council and you can say, whatever state, and then you just override that.
They just
I
would
didn't
not
say
get
that, but that's part of the.
Right, but they just would not get the credit then.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't
State.
have to apply for the
Right.
credit. Yep, you can do all of that without even applying for the credit.
Okay, so Jim, since we basically only got one response from the business owners, this is basically for them. It's not for the city. I mean, yes, it's a great thing in the sense that there's that one review, and we could save some of the buildings potentially with some historic preservation, which is great, and I'm all for it. But if the business owners aren't interested, I'm curious if we should put a pin in this and either find out why they're not, and it's an education thing, or are they never going to use the tax credits because they feel like this is overhead they don't want? And if so, then maybe we keep the $30,000 for another project.
So we sent a lot of information with we mailed hard copies of the information, the facts about historic districts, the things, actually the presentation and the things that we were going to discuss in more detail at the meeting. I think the lack of response is that they were, you could say that they were in favor or didn't have any objection to it. If there would have been objections, they probably would have come on and let us know. But I mean, we sent them hard copies of everything. So there was a 4 or 5 page sheet, facts about historic districts. We sent copies of the presentation. We sent a letter that explained what we were doing, the timing of what we were doing, and how it impacted them individually. And we got one response.
As I said, I've spoken with business owners downtown, and a lot of them would like to make improvements to their buildings, but just can't afford to do it. And this actually gives them the opportunity to do that, incentivizes them through credits and not,
Gives
and
them a
not through
resource.
deduction. Exactly.
And we did have one business reach out to us, and they were going to do something sooner rather than later, and they're going to wait for this before they do renovations.
Yeah.
I also think too, as we look to revitalize downtown, some of the empty buildings, I think this is an incentive for someone who might be thinking about purchasing or moving in. And I did have one more question. There is a property just to the east on Main Street, right next to the gas station. It's an insurance building there that
It's not in
is,
the
I believe, on the state. Is it in there?
I think it already may be listed as
Yeah, the old filling stations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
no,
you're
next
talking
to the filling station.
on the
Is
other
it in
side of
there?
the
I'm talking about Tim's insurance building.
Joe's.
Oh, that's not in here.
So it's not in this, or is it in there? Am I just?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's
It's
the,
Joel.
the,
He's
the
I
small
think
building.
on the currently on the state.
But he's not on the federal.
I don't think he's on the. So we include him in that.
We can take a look at it, yeah, this isn't hard set in stone, it was just
Right.
based on our, and we would have public meetings, so if,
Oh, I'm sorry, please speak in the mic, 'cause no one can
Oh,
hear
I'm
you.
so sorry.
That's okay.
I was like, who are you pointing at? This is definitely just a guideline, so we can talk to those owners, and we would have public meetings if they wanted to come and discuss, and definitely discussing like the benefits and everything related to that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Excuse
Any further questions, comments?
Oh, please.
Yes.
Do we need to come to the mic, or can
Yes,
we just speak
uh-huh.
loudly?
One step forward.
Let's go get them. So, yeah.
And if you would please state your name and address for the record.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Bill Brandon.
Carrie Brandon, and we are the property owners at 208 East Main,
Mhm.
the old B&H appliance. And so, yeah, our vote is yes, we're definitely in favor? We
Yes.
tried to attend the Zoom meeting, but we weren't able to connect, so I think we're the ones you were referring to. So, but I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to try to do as much as we can to preserve just the beauty of the history of downtown Gardner. It's pretty spectacular, the history. I do have lots of questions, but I don't want to take up everybody's time to ask them, so.
Oh, no,
trying
no,
to-
no, please. I think that I spoke with, now you guys don't own, do you own that building over there?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I might have spoken with you or somebody about that specific building because of the fact that there's some disrepair at some of the top. I think some of the eaves were having some issues with.
We
Yeah.
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 And we had all the tuck pointing
Yeah,
done
yeah.
over the last
Exactly,
summer. Yeah.
exactly. So
that
that
would
was
kind
a
of-
couple of years back, but
Yeah.
you're the ones who said you wanted to do some additional work on that, that just
Yeah.
didn't have the funds or the ability to.
I don't know. Well, we just bought it. I don't know. It may have been somebody else.
It might have been the previous owner, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
But I know that was the specific building that I was discussing, which was the
Oh.
one that,
It could have
that
been
you
me and
own.
you. I don't.
yeah, but that was, I'm
But-
I'm forgettable, I know.
But I think for us, I think it's the timing questions of everything.
Yeah.
Because we're ready to get rocking and rolling
Mhm.
on renovating and so how that all works and making sure we don't do anything that we couldn't, get the building approved. How long does it take for this study, which is the funds that you're voting on,
Mhm.
right, to be approved, the study that needs to go for approval for historic register, right? How long does that whole process take for the city of Gardner?
I believe there's a timeline in the
Yep.
agreement that's in the,
Yep.
in the packet.
Does it happen
It
pretty
looks like
quickly?
about 90 days.
Oh, 90 days.
Official National Register listing will occur roughly 90 days following this presentation.
I think that's just the submission of the nomination.
Okay, so not 90 days.
90 plus.
But I think it,
Could be more than, roughly 90.
but it was prior, as long as they applied for it prior to opening the doors, correct, or if I?
Yeah.
We'll let you take that.
That's a really good question, that there is a process that allows for application for if they wanted to do work on their building, but, I mean, I can talk to them
Yeah.
after.
Okay, yes,
There
please.
is a process.
Yeah.
But it does, because it's bureaucracy, it does take a while, so it won't be 90 days.
We don't understand what you mean.
I know you don't know what that means.
But then again, if the process is underway, a lot of times they'll just retro that, correct? I mean, I've heard of that before, where I know it's not guaranteed, but
I just have to say there's a process, so.
yeah.
Okay. All right. No further questions. Do we have a motion for new business item number 1?
So moved.
Second. There you go. I knew you were big on this, so, yes.
Motion Deaton, second Roberts, that we authorize the city administrator to execute an agreement with Rosen Preservation LLC for services in the amount of $30,000. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? New business item number 1 passes.